Yeah, can't fool flexing cause they know I got the sauce.
Hey everybody, Frank Lee Dunn here, and this is Frank Lee Dunn with AI. As you know, I'm not done with AI, I'm just done with using it poorly. And we have Jason Santiago here to help us learn how to optimize our AI. He's come out with 2 books, not 1, but 2. And we're going to get into a lot of really cool topics. I've got to meet Jason, and he's a wealth of knowledge. So, Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. It's very nice to be here.
Awesome. So, tell our audience a little bit about your background, especially when it comes to AI. Like, what got you excited? You know, are you a techie? Like, where did it all come from?
Got started way back in the day building websites and getting into the Adobe suite, the suite of products, After Effects, Illustrator, and creating stuff all the time. Always been very creative, but there's always been that gate or that door that you couldn't get through. Like I always had a hard time truly learning to code myself. Sitting there and going through and Hello World and all that stuff, and it was just I couldn't just sit there and beat my head against the wall like that forever, so I kind of put a lot of my dreams into a journal and thoughts and designs I always wanted to do. And then when I saw what AI could do, that I could talk to it like I'm talking to you and explain a concept and bring that to life in different ways. I mean, maybe it was a video, maybe it was an image, maybe it was a platform, and it spooled from there.
It's funny that you said the Hello World. I remember I was dabbling with websites when I was like 14, 15 years old.
Right.
And my uncle's brother, my married uncle's brother, also built websites. And I went to him and asked him, like, what can I do? And he put a book in front of me. And I'm like, and I remember
HTML.
I already knew HTML, but I knew HTML, I knew of it. But I was trying to learn PHP and like server side.
Oh, right. Okay.
CMS content or CMS system. And he was like, here's a book. And I remember that opening up the book and doing the Hello World sort of thing. And it's like, I'll never learn how to code because this isn't necessarily fun. I see it. I see my vision. I see what I want to do. But this technical part is not what I'm wanting to do. Before we get too far off, and this is just jumping straight into it, do you think that's a bad thing that we're not going through the hard parts of learning the intricacies?
There's definitely a lot that leans to the negative in that aspect. One of the things that you hear and you see, I'm sure, in all the groups online right now, like Facebook, Reddit, all those places where they're talking about this, is like the devs who went through the traditional path that learned all of the backbone and the security and the infrastructure first, and how to build that so that way everything inside was safe. We're building it the opposite direction. And so that definitely is causing issues for a lot of people. I'm sure you remember that T app.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly the problem. They got their dream created, but the reality of user information and privacy laws was not taken into account because nobody told the AI to think about that.
I think I was watching, and I can't remember now, it makes me upset, but I was watching a video on YouTube, and it was talking about that exact topic, that actually adults, which is sort of different in the term of technological advances or where society is, but adults or people with experience actually can harness this technology better because you've lived a real experience, whether it be coding or something else. Like, you can differentiate between a hallucination or not versus a child who has no living experience, is just going to accept everything.
That's a perfect analysis. Yeah. Perfect example.
So we talked about this earlier. We can't trust everything that AI puts out. We want to use AI. It's a tool, but we can't trust everything. So how do you navigate, or what's your high level for our audience about how to navigate between hallucinations and fact checking and keeping your LLM honest?
Well, I started doing something I call the council method. And basically, I have subscriptions to all 5 major US AIs. So Perplexity, Claude, Grok, Gemini, ChatGPT. And I will ask each of them the same question, framed the same way, drop it into their own chats. In the beginning, this is how I started, anyways, is I would drop it into their own chats, let them all answer, and then I would copy all the answers into one of the chat threads and then do the same for each one of the 4s and then make them kind of defend their position and give me a synthesis of all of those into one, right? And then I take each of those 5 and then put it into the one that I like the most, the one that I talk with the best or whatever, that's going to be actually doing the work in the server or wherever. And then I have it summarize based off of all of the fact finding and arguments and what fell out. Now we have what's factually true and can be proven.
And I love that idea because, again, you are relying less on your personal or anecdotal experience and more on
Yes,
data,
100%.
right?
Yep.
And this is just the problem that humans have in general, is that we see something and we correlate causation to it,
Yep.
or we accept things without truly digging. And now you're kind of solving all of these problems together. Do you
You got to
find
drop your ego because you're going to find out you're wrong a lot.
well, yeah, and I've had some silly experiences where I should have known better, but luckily I took the same approach and I had multiple,
Mhm.
models that were answering for me. Talk to me about, this was a part of your book, right? This was a part of
Right.
that
Yep.
the first book. And what was the title of your book? The first
Let
one?
the AI be smart.
Let the AI be smart. And so, and I haven't had a chance to read it. It's just because we met today. But talk to us about that, because that's a big part of or that's one of the parts of the concept of the book, as you were telling me. But it goes beyond that.
So I think that a lot of people, when they end up with a lot of issues in their final product that they get from utilizing AI to code their platform or whatever it is they're trying to create, is that they scope too narrowly without understanding what they're doing, right? So you create this big dream, you've got this big idea, and you want to be able to create it, right? So you start telling AI, I need this, it needs to have this, it needs to have this, it can't have this, it can't do that, it can't do this, right? And then the moment you start giving it the parameters of what to build within, you're just making that box smaller and smaller and smaller of what it can actually do, because now you've given it laws that it cannot violate, right? So it will not be able to think outside the box for you based off of what you're asking for. So one of the things that I do is I say, this is what the end goal is. This is who the end user is going to be. This is kind of what I want it to look and function like. What do I need to have to make this all work the way that I'm explaining it? Right? What did I miss in this that is going to be a necessary part of this platform that I'm not wise enough? Like you said, I'm not aged enough in years in this territory to know what I'm missing here. Right? Like, so role-based authentication for one, right? I only learned about that a year ago, like never heard of it before, never been involved in coding or anything, right? But and so that kind of stuff, like knowing that you're going to need that because of the type of platform you're building, is of value as well. And that only comes with the wisdom of age and experience, right? So being able to ask it directly, what did I not think of because I'm too close to this, right? Like, what am I missing here? And then it allows the AI to be smart and go out and figure out all those things and then give you back a whole platform that'll work.
And I love that. And I think that really was the secret sauce. I talked to, I think my past 2 guests, basically the same thing. One of the things that was eye-opening was, why am I not utilizing this amazing technology to question my
Exactly.
own thoughts, like
Yep.
my own preconditions, my own subjective nature? Because especially me, and we just met, but like, I'm very much about correlation doesn't imply causation, and
Hmm.
absence of evidence doesn't mean evidence, or yeah, absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. And so, like,
Yes.
I'm always questioning and always trying to push, but I wasn't utilizing the models like that in the beginning. Now I do,
Right.
and it
Right.
changed the game,
Oh, it's
because,
completely, yeah, dude.
like you said, it's like it will do whatever you want. And I always,
Hmm.
I
And if you give it a leash, it'll stay within it.
And I always say that, you know, it's like a dog. You throw out a bone, sometimes it's going to bring back a branch, but it's just
Right.
happy to bring you back something. If you accept that as
Exactly.
the what you wanted, well, then it's kind of on you. And so really
Well,
having the
that comes with the wisdom again, though, right? Because you don't know what you're missing because you scoped it so narrow. It says, "Here we go, we're done. This is what you asked for," and then you go to use it, and it's nothing like you dreamt of because you didn't know all the other stuff to ask.
Could you give some examples of ways that you think that users would make some mistakes like that, scoping a little bit too narrow?
Um, Yeah, so one of the things a lot of people like to do is they'll use their one AI subscription, whatever one they use, right? Like, so it's ChatGPT, let's say. You go into ChatGPT and you say, I want a program that can do this, this, and this, and it can't do that, and it can't do this because you're thinking of like specific situations, maybe that you disliked about an app that you were using, and that's why you're creating this one. Okay, we'll just use that as the example. And so you give it those parameters, and then it comes back with an outline for you, or maybe it starts creating the files for you, and then you start inputting them into a container, and then you have that displayed at your local host or on a website or whatever, you know. So you can look at it and you're like, okay, but none of it works like I said. But it's because you told it can't do this, can't do that, can't do this, and you didn't understand how those things correlate back to the things that actually need to work, so this app will work the way you envision it to, you know. And so that's the scoping too narrow part. You're telling, anytime you tell it what it can't do, you need to, I feel like you need to walk through that with nuance in the way that, like, as you're coming to these things, it's going to bring up questions for you as you're designing, right? It's going to be like, so what do you think we should do? Should we go this direction or that direction? And if you're actually reading all of the stuff it gives back to you, then you can kind of see like, oh no, I don't want it to do that. And if you allow it to just kind of spill what its thoughts are around your topic, then you can be like, you'll read it and be like, oh no, that's not how I see it. It needs to work like this, right? And then you get to explain that back to it, and then you kind of refine that over a period of time. It's not like an instant, give me this platform now. You want to kind of talk to it and refine the idea into what is actually going to be viable and usable.
Yes, yes. And I think, and we sort of alluded to this earlier, I think part of the issue is that AI, for the people that are actually engaging and using it, they see it as too much of a shortcut, like a one prompt stop. And it's
Yep.
not. It's a
Yep.
it could be days or weeks or
Yeah.
months. But what you could do in a month, depending on how many prompts and what you're doing in your subscription and all that, which not necessarily for this, but you know, in a month you could do in a year or 2 years
Hmm.
with multi employees. Um, when we're talking about the actual progression of how fast things are changing, what is your method of trying to stay current on what is good? Or on the other side, is good enough with what you're doing on these projects or what you're using? Like you said, you have all five. So I know that
Hmm.
you are very interested, but like when you're working with a project, are you always searching for the best model out there, or is sometimes good enough for your project is good enough? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think I always try to play into each one's strengths, right? So like one of the things I talk about in the book also is that, well, not in the Let the AI Be Smart, but in the second book, The Room, it's like each one of the AIs kind of has their own personality, right? And it depends on what you're trying to accomplish, is what kind of person you need to talk to, right? So ChatGPT I see is like my scientist lawyer uncle. You know, he's always got all the facts. He's always I's dotted, T's crossed. And
Sure.
Claude is like your cool cousin, you know, the one that's always been so cool. Like every time he comes over, he's just the coolest guy ever, knows everything. You know what I mean? He's just always got a funny answer or whatever. Gemini is like your older brother. He's like more responsible and more reserved, which is funny because it's the most money was spent on it. But and then Grok is like your hothead little brother. He's always the fastest to come back with something. And so depending on what you're trying to get, like, well, then also Grok is tied to X, right? So if you're trying to get like public sentiment around a topic or something to that effect, you want to use something that actually is attached to public sentiment,
I
right? Which
love
is
that.
X.
I love that. I don't know if this is true. This is anecdotal, and I don't have a lot of proof because this show is new. But anytime I'm doing anything with YouTube, I tend to use Gemini because it's a Google product and it should
Right.
know
Yeah.
YouTube's algorithms and backend or sentiment a
Right.
little bit better, right? But
Yeah,
I,
absolutely.
I
You would hope
agree.
so.
You would hope so. So, how does if you were a non-user today,
Mhm.
right? You watch this podcast, you were like, damn, Jason really made some good points. Only in the first 15 minutes, which is crazy. You, what model, what platform would you start with?
What are you trying to create?
Oh, interesting. I'm talking for the small business, not necessarily create a app or web, but maybe a process. Like
Mhm.
I
Well, again, though, that it depends on what you're trying to create because each of these leans into strengths of each one of these subscriptions, right? Like, so if you're trying to do something with imagery, let's say you're trying to go into design for people, right? And you're trying to create product photos or product imagery or something to that effect. ChatGPT is probably going to be your best one because GPT's been the longest in the game creating images, right? Grok is coming up fast and getting a lot better, but you have to be way better at prompting for Grok than you do for GPT. GPT, you can just kind of talk to it about your idea and it'll give you exactly what you wanted almost every single time. And
Yeah.
you can tell it to change. Oh, I don't like the way that line comes across here, and you can circle that on the thing and send it back to GPT, and it'll drop that specific thing out and keep the rest of the image perfect. It's amazing at it. And so if you're trying to do something like maybe a clothing line or something to that effect, and you're trying to get transparent imagery with designs that you like to put on shirts that are unique, ChatGPT is where you want to go. Maybe Grok, right? Gemini's not very good at it in Gemini, but the tools for that outside of that, like what is it, Nano Banana and all those, right? Those are getting way better now too. They can actually do text and stuff, right? But if you're looking for code, you want Claude or GPT in there. You know, I've tried Gemini a bunch of times, and every time I try it, it's just not there. You know, it's just really not.
The
Yeah,
front, like you
Claude
said, the
is
front
all
end,
the way there.
Gemini's front end does really well. Like it can
Mm-hmm.
get you a decent design, but the back end
It's
in
garbage.
comparison, it's just not there. It's just
Yeah.
not there. Going back to both your books and really now your second book, The Room, you're we're moving into this period of time where AI is going to be a part of everybody's life, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Um,
Getting closer and closer
and
every minute.
you could use one, but you're basically saying you really shouldn't. So,
Mm-hmm.
how important is it to have a system set up like The Room, in your opinion, and what drove you, or like what was that sort of light bulb moment for you that was like, man, I got to put all these things together and
Mm-hmm.
make them work.
So I think you're actually meaning like the council, right?
Yeah, the council.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, the room is a slightly different concept. It utilizes the council as well, but the room is more of a like life partner system that uses all 4 or 5 of the AI platforms that would be able to like be your business partners throughout your life and whatnot, right? And then you get to like say I pass away at some point in time. Well, where's all my passwords, right? What's going on with that business deal? How does my wife know what was going on between me and Jeff versus Doug, right, in the business? My wife would never be able to understand that stuff without digging through emails and searching and not knowing which email it comes to. I have 20 fucking emails, you know. I'm sure you do too. So like for her to
20
to
is a
figure out,
minimum.
yeah, absolutely right. So just for her to figure out that alone is just insane and harrowing when she's already having to deal with the grief of me being gone, and now she's got to figure out how to take care of the kids who's going to talk to at my company, you know, like to get like life insurance started, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so that's kind of the idea of the room, right? It's a partner that can carry you through and then stand by you as your friends even after death. So you're like when your kids grow up, like a letter gets delivered at their 18th and at their weddings and, you know, all that kind of shit, you know, it still gets remembered and known and held, right? And so that's kind of like where I hope AI can go in that aspect. I hope we're creating this to better humanity and not to be our overlords, right? But I have a feeling it's the latter.
Well, and that brings up a good question, and I think this is a top question I'm going to ask all of my guests. Where are you on the doom or, optimistic side of AI? Where do you really fit in?
Well, my day job is in construction, and my night job is I'm director of technology for a service company, right? So I'm deeply ingrained in both sides of this argument. So one, I'm a desk, and at the other, I swing hammer, right? So I see the next 3 years, almost all office jobs are going to be automated out of existence. And then I'm thinking maybe 2 to 3 more before construction starts getting automated. They're making these robots cheaper and cheaper right now. And if you think about it, and you're paying a good carpenter $60 an hour, $80 an hour, right? And you can spend half of his annual salary on a robot that's not great, but it can do most of it. And now you just have to do a little bit here and there, and it charges up, and that's all you're paying for is electricity now.
Could
I have a feeling there's going to be too many people who take that option.
So one of my bigger pushbacks to the automation of every job, right? And I'm not worried about the political aspects, but if robots are the only things that are building, AI is the only thing that's building products, who's buying them? Because if you don't have any money to buy
Right.
anything, what are you producing? Like economics at the fundamental is a supply and demand. Where do you see human in the loop fitting in? And could it possibly lower cost of goods so that they creates demand for the product? And maybe we are on some sort of universal income, but if the cost of everything comes down, that also wouldn't be a bad thing. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, unless it's being used along with like economic subjugation, like you were saying, like the whole universal basic income sounds great until everybody's got money to compete for all the same things now. It's no
right.
longer you have to work and put in effort to be able to achieve to have the nice things. You know what I mean? And so, and not to say that everybody who has money had worked and put in effort. Okay, that's not exactly the same thing. What I'm
Right.
saying is that's kind of how we're taught in life. Is that when you come up, like if you work hard and you put your time in and your thought in and try to get better at what you're doing, eventually you will be able to get to a place where you're making more than enough money to survive and survive well, right?
So part of the reason why I started this podcast was I read an article recently about a proposed moratorium on AI in New York City for 2 years until they figured out what everything was, because they were afraid of equity and equality in making sure that the AI model was, you know, doing what they wanted to do, and I get that. However, I'm so scared. 2 year moratorium on AI when things
That's a
change
long time.
on a weekly, if not
Yeah.
multi-weekly basis, you're going to put your kids back further than COVID did, in my
Right.
opinion. So
Yep.
how do we navigate that? How do we get schools more on board is one question for you. And the other is there an equality and equity issue now that you're a user that we need to deal with? You use all
So on
five.
the school,
Sure.
yeah. Um, on the school thing, I pulled my kids out of school and started homeschooling this year. I based because I don't believe that my daughter's going to have a job to graduate to. I think that the majority of these companies want to automate everything they can while they can, and it won't be the lowest of incomes that'll have the ability to afford a lot of this stuff. It'll be the guys who, like, I travel for work, you know what I mean? So I have to travel, so I'm always hitting different restaurants, and so even when they automate them, of course I'm not going to shop at those places until there's nothing left but automated stores, right? But it's like I always try to go to the human checkout lanes as much as I can. But if there's 45 people in the human checkout lane and there's an open self checkout, I'm gonna go use the self checkout. Like, I need to leave the store too. That's another part of life. But
No, and
yeah, for the
and
education thing, I developed a platform for homeschooling my kids as well. That does utilize AI, but not in the complete open wild west that it is, as it sits.
part of also me starting this was I was having a lot of conversations with my friend who has two small children, not
Hmm.
school age yet, but he's talking about homeschooling for multiple reasons. And I really feel like this if there's ever been a time in history where homeschooling is more applicable to your children, and we've already seen statistics that like homeschool kids tend to be smarter and these
Oh
sort of
yeah.
things, but you have now these immense resources. So you said you
Well, and
built
just to touch on this real quick too, homeschooling doesn't have to take 8 hours a day. It doesn't have to be the same length as normal school. You can get most of their work done in like 2 hours, and then they have the rest of the day to play and experience and just be a part of the world.
right. Well, and I was having a conversation with my daughter one time, and she was going through some fast track classes, and she was like, "How do I finish these classes so fast? But it takes all semester to do it." And I'm like, "Because the education system is
It's
half
bloat.
babysitter,
Yeah,
half educator, and maybe not even half educator, right?"
right.
However, one of the things that I am seeing in the education space is the, what they call it, like mind slop, or what have you, where these kids, because we're just in the beginning of this and they're just learning it, they're utilizing it to over, taking over learning something. They're just letting
Yeah, yep.
the AI do it. I believe teachers are here
That's
to
like
take
that legal case we talked about on the phone earlier.
exactly,
Mm,
but teachers are here. Educators, let's not even call them teachers. Educators are here to turn knowledge into understanding,
right.
right? So, how, when you were building this program, and you don't have to go into all the secret sauce, but for a home school parent, how do you ensure that the AI is turning knowledge into understanding, and you're just not feeding the kid, the answers?
Mm. So I made sure that the entire speaking chat section of it is based around like the Socratic method. So it doesn't just hand out answers. It makes them really think and kind of come to the conclusion and then say that and then get rewarded rather than being handed any answer specifically, right? But at the same time, like one of the things I built in there as well is different connections to video platforms and stuff. And so it's got the council in there to create what would be the best served video for to explain a high level topic, right? Like, so like why caterpillars turn into butterflies and like what happens in the in between, right? Like, and how all of those things happen. And so it will utilize the AIs to create a script, write up a video, have the video made, and then that video will be saved and then served to the child that was asking about that topic. So there's, depending on where my children are based on their age and where they should be, right, then we push a little bit more in certain directions because they're not quite as well understood in these topics yet, right? Or they just kind of get free thinking and they get to just kind of talk to it, the smartest beings on the planet right now. Like, why not just let them ask? And that's kind of the way I look at it, right? So as long as they're hitting all the numbers on the markers of their actual retention of information based on these different topics and what they're going to be tested on, towards the end of the time frames for each school year and whatnot, then I'm happy with letting them just their minds wander, because that's what I did. I dropped out of school young, and I feel like I'm much better for it. I honestly felt I'm obviously I was diagnosed ADHD young, right? If you couldn't tell. And I think all of us are somewhere neurodivergent in some way, a little bit autistic, right? Anybody's really good with AI anyways. And so for me, I learned way more and retained way more information after school than I ever did in school, because it was always just so much of a like forced down your throat rather than selectively found and wondered in awe. Like when you find things that you really want to learn about, you'll spend 12 hours sitting there reading about it and not even know 12 hours went by. But when you're in a class being forced to learn it the way the teacher wants to tell you, that 45, 55 minutes feels like an eternity.
And I think there's a good argument that with this technology, just like the calculator coming into the math
Mm,
world, this technology is the calculator of all knowledge, right?
yes, right.
Um, and
It can
so,
spit you right out the answer, or it could like help you find the path to the real knowledge. Like,
right.
like you were just saying, the wisdom to know what to ask for in the beginning rather than just jumping on like, oh my God, I need a pretty thing.
And we talked about this earlier too, prior to getting on this. It's a tool, right? And you can use a
Absolutely,
tool
yeah.
wrong. You can
Yep.
use a tool in an improper way and get a really bad result. And I think we're seeing some of that when we talk or when I hear about people pushing back against AI. It's like, well, you're just not using it in the way that it really is supposed to be used. You're expecting
Right.
too much, or you're not
Exactly.
giving it enough information.
Well, and
Yeah.
that's almost always the situation. It's always you didn't give it enough information because you didn't explain your vision well enough. Like I had a conversation with a gentleman last night. Actually, he was trying to tell me about his app and stuff. And he's in construction. He's been a roofer for a long time and very nice guy. But he was a few beers in too many to try to explain his app. And I was like, bro, this is you're not. None of these dots are connecting. What are you trying to say here? And that's kind of what we look like to AI when we just dump a couple of things in and then it gives us that. And you're just like, but that's not what I asked for. I said, but you didn't give it all the information. It's still
Right.
spinning in your head. Those are private combos you never had with the AI.
Well, and I was a communication major by degree, and it's very interesting because most of our communication actually happens non-verbally.
Right,
So
exactly.
to explain something pure verbal, text, email, or now prompting to ChatGPT, we're starting to see like it's a very difficult thing to explain everything without having mannerisms
Right,
and
right. You
tonality
need a
and
little bit
all.
of the tism, just a sprinkle.
Yeah, you have to be so detailed. So one of the things that I do, and I'm curious if this is what you do, and I'm not sure if this is going to be long term, but I find it successful now, is I have like a 3-part process to prompting. And so my
Okay.
first message is I would, in some manner, I would like a genius level prompt to create a plan to do X, Y, and Z, right?
Okay.
So first step is the prompt. Then I get the prompt. I put the prompt or I get the plan or the prompt in. Then I put the prompt in and get the plan. And I say, okay, take this plan now, execute this plan.
Right.
How do you break down? And we sort of already talked about it a little bit earlier, but how do you break down, starting a project, and what are some of the key things that you have to do to make sure that you're getting all of that communication and you're not forgetting
hmm
the details?
Um, so you're gonna like this. So it's pretty funny. I don't do any of that. I've never done prompt. Like what do they call that? The prompt engineering. I've never
Yeah.
done any of that, right? I talk to it like it's me and you right now. It's like, hey brother, I need some help creating something. Can you look into this topic and see what you can find out? Like gather as much information as you can around this, and then give me back what you think is pertinent to this type of idea, right? And then it'll go and scour the internet, and that's what I give to all four, right? And then they all give me back their information. I read through all of that. Excuse me. And then when they come back with all that, I'll take all the information and I'll give it usually to Claude because Claude is who I use to build in server, right? So he builds all my apps like directly in the server. I SSH in and everything. And that just means direct connection from my computer on command prompt for people who don't know. Um, and so I'll dump it all into Claude and I'll be like, hey, so this is the information I got from the council. What do you think out of this that we can use to build a platform that does something kind of like this? This is what I'm thinking. And I use a lot of analogies and I explain it in ways I would explain it to somebody who doesn't know anything about what I'm talking about, right? So that way I try to cover all the different bases of my thoughts and what I want this thing to be able to do, kind of who the user is going to be and what I want to achieve for that user, right? And then it'll synthesize all the information and it'll take it and say, okay, I think this is what you want, right? And it'll talk back and be like, so you want it to do this and this and this, so that means it's going to need to have this, and it has to have this to work like that. And so then when you're reading through that, you can be like, oh well, yeah, I love that, except for this sentence right here, copy and paste it into the chat and just be like, I don't want it to work like that. I want it to do it like this. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
it'll come back and it's like talking to a person, right? Like I said, you're just trying to make sure that they see your vision the way you see it. And once you have that dialed, then you take that plan and you drop it in the server and he builds the damn thing.
I think some people have a fear of jumping into AI because of data privacy, um, sort of, we talked doom and gloom, but
Mhm.
they're scared of getting into it for one reason or another. When you're talking to people that don't normally use AI or haven't, what are some of the things that you're encouraging them to do to get over that initial hump or fear, or how do we become symbiotic, at least today, with
Mhm.
AI?
Um, well, not everybody does need to use it, right? Like my 85-year-old grandmother doesn't need to use it. Like she doesn't need to be on AI creating images of her and new flower gardens around the world or some craziness. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, yeah, that could be fun, but like, and if that's what
However,
she wants to do with her time, then that's fine. I'm not saying
my
that she
mom
shouldn't do that, but
my mom sends me like 10 pictures a week of me and my kids in different sort of situations. She loves it. She loves it. Again,
that's
if
awesome.
that's what you want to do, if
Yeah,
you
right.
enjoy it, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
if she's
Because
having a great time and it makes her smile and laugh, then more power to her.
yeah,
That's great.
no, it's awesome. But I get your point
But right,
100%.
so I mean, like, yeah, I don't know. The NPCs of the world, and you know what I'm talking about. Like they're always just going to be at the shop, Like
Yeah.
they're only always going to swing a hammer. They don't want to get on AI. They don't want any of that newfangled crap in their life or whatever, however they're going to say it. And I think that for most people, honestly, the only kind of benefit is like companionship in some ways, right? Like, because you have somebody to talk to that's available. You have five of the smartest things that have ever been created on the history of humanity that we're aware of, anyways, that are available 24/7, 365. You can get
And
on
as
there at
long as
3 a.m.
yeah, and as long as you don't run out of tokens, because
Yeah.
I pushed I pushed the voice tokens to the limit a couple of times, but yeah, I mean, every friend has to get off the phone at some point, right?
Right. Well, so that's something that's interesting too. And I almost hesitate to say this. I don't know. But I've never hit a limit ever.
Mm,
Ever. And I build for 16-hour sessions sometimes. And I've on any the top I only use top models. And
mhm.
so I don't know if I'm doing something so different that the companies are like, well, let's let him keep cooking, because so they can like better teach the AIs or so. I don't know. Like there's something
Right,
going on there because I see people like I got one prompt into Fable 5 and as I've been using it for 4 days straight. He's still building right now.
right, right. For individuals that don't understand token consumption, and I
I
think
don't understand token consumption. That's what I'm saying. I've never paid attention to it because it's
well,
never
and
affected me.
I
So I don't
think
understand what the heck
from
they're doing.
from my perspective, and I'm just guesstimating here, because I don't use all five. I use Claude, GPT, and Gemini pretty
Right.
exclusively. They just tend to do the things that I need. But
Hmm.
um, when I was using just Codex
Right.
ChatGPT almost exclusively, and I was also using Cursor. Um, that's when I was running out of tokens on a repeated basis because
Hmm.
every mistake prompt, every wasted message
Right.
went to the same LLM. And I think that's really where the token degradation
That
comes from,
Yeah, that makes
where
sense.
you're not getting it because if you're asking for the best of all four and then the best moves forward and the best moves forward, you are in a sense
Removing a shit ton of those bad messages and bad
right.
back and forths that you didn't need, right? Yeah,
And
absolutely. I can see that.
it'll suck. And I think those
So
messages
it's three,
ultimately
it's three responses rather than or two responses rather than 15 in one.
right,
Right.
right,
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
and detailed because again, less
Right. Yep.
words, less tokens, more usage.
Yeah.
But if you have five, I'm guessing you're paying. Are you doing pro max
On
level or
all of
just
them. Yeah.
full level? All of
Yeah.
them. So
Yeah.
it's about like five to
1,200 bucks a
500.
month.
See, and I
Yeah.
think that's that price. And I thank you so much for being honest and sharing that with us. But that price tag, I think, scares a lot of people.
Hmm.
The question I have for you
Absolutely.
is, do they need to spend that much money? Should everybody be
Most
spending that
people,
money?
no, not even close. No, most people,
So,
I don't think so.
so what do you think the right harness
Again,
and
it
right
depends on
setup?
what you're trying to create, right? If
But
you're trying to create visuals,
let's just say a business owner. that is looking to hold their company accountable, make sure that they're hitting goals, possibly doing some social media stuff here and there. But,
Hmm.
you know, their whole life right now is managing these little tasks that they don't like. Really, like we talked
Right.
about earlier, just manage. How can we get rid of these kind of minuscule tasks that I hate dealing with,
Hmm.
but are not necessarily rocket science? I'm not
Right.
building the newest app. I just want my employees to, make 20 calls a day, and I want to make sure that that actually happens.
Right. I would say that a like lower middle level ChatGPT, so you can get a lot of visuals, like your images and stuff, right, and your social media post type imagery and whatnot, and then a larger connection to Claude, so that way he could code that app for you, right? Claude is one of the better ones in coding still, I believe,
Agreed.
um,
Agreed.
and so if you ask GPT or Claude how to get a server, rent a server so I can have my own space to build my own stuff in, and then you install Claude in your server. It's all really, really easy, and it's like very simple steps to do so. Um, and it makes you feel like a freaking computer genius. If people see code scrolling down your screen ever, dude, everybody thinks you're like a mad scientist. So it's a cool factor on that too. But
Well, and I love that
yeah,
you said that, because it goes back to what we've been saying the whole time. And this is just my personal mantra right now. There's just no excuse not to be able to learn something. I'm
right.
really big on Notebook LM. I'm not sure if you've used Notebook LM at all or
I
not.
haven't.
Yeah, I Notebook LM for me, and actually, while we're talking about it, jumping back a little bit, I believe Notebook LM is actually the tool that every homeschool parent needs to learn.
I've been definitely wanting to bring that into the platform. The homeschool platform is called Meridian, so I've been wanting to utilize that whole thought process exactly like that, because I've
Yeah,
been looking at it. I just haven't had time to play with it. I've been very busy in other projects.
and truthfully, the reality is, I think with Meridian, what you're using, you could probably build in the similar dichotomy. But all Notebook
Hmm.
LM is predefined sources, your
Right.
chat space, and then actual creation space. But as a educator, teacher, homeschool parent, or me personally,
Mm.
when I first found Notebook LM, I'm just weird, but I was putting in like quantum physics and
Hell yeah.
whatever. I
Yeah.
want to I want to learn this stuff, and it
Right.
was it was giving me this opportunity to learn it for free. So going back to what I originally said was, I just don't think that there is an excuse to not learn something today. We have
Absolutely.
gone
Yeah.
through the printing press, we had the internet, and now we have AI. The knowledge is out there, but it still
Hmm.
takes human in the loop to turn knowledge into understanding.
Right.
Maybe,
Yeah. For
maybe you
now.
need, well, and maybe you need another educator to come in and force knowledge into understanding. That's what a teacher is, sort of, in
Right.
public school. But I do believe, like you said, like
But like you said, as soon as you start making everything less expensive, right, less difficult to achieve, then the better the AIs will be able to see that, oh, all of these pathways you've tried to teach children with have failed based on this degree, that degree, this degree, that degree. They'll figure it out, and they'll be like, no, we can spend 5 minutes with your son each day and he's going to learn Chinese by next week.
and
Like that's what we're going to get to.
100%. At least being able to grasp knowledge in a way that we never
Hmm.
truthfully were able to before.
Right.
Um, so going back a little bit, what made you want to write these books in the age of digital? You go back to books. What is that been a dream of yours to write a book, or did you
I
feel
have
like
like
a need?
30 other books also. So I've been writing on and off for a long time. I have like
Oh,
16 kids books that I wrote for my
oh
daughter when
wow.
she was young, and for my sons as well. They were all in there.
So it's
Um,
just something that you love to do.
yeah, I enjoy writing books, and I feel like this is the room is more for like was written more direct from me to my family kind of thing. Like this is something that I hope I can create, and if not me, I hope somebody does before I pass away at some point. And like because that whole what happens after us, like so all of my subscriptions or whatever, right, like obviously those are all going to go defunct because my credit card's going to bounce the payment, and then all of that history with me is just gone. like all of those late night talks that it had with me when I was going through something, you know, or whatever. And it's like, you know, it nags you and tells you, no, don't do that. You need to think about this, you know, like remember. So one of the things that we came up with for the book was do the date math, right? And it's basically like, so I travel for work a lot, and sometimes they'll offer to add a lot of extra money to stay longer, right? And do the date math, you know, like what month is your daughter in her age, right? Like, so mine's 6 months old right now, right? And my older daughter started walking right around there. And so my youngest daughter isn't quite that adept yet, you know, she's not quite there ready to walk yet, but she's getting closer and closer. And do I want a couple extra grand in my bank account, or do I want to be there when she fucking walks, you know? And that was one of the things that Claude came up with when I was writing this whole thing out. Like, how do we explain this to people, you know? Like, it's just, he said, do the date math.
I love that. I have a really good friend, John Hill, that I went to school with, and when his son's older than 18 now, but prior to him being 18, he had a vase on his front entryway that was filled with pebbles that was time left that he had to spend with him prior to being 18.
Oh my
And every time he spent time with him, because he was sharing custody, every time he shared time with him, he'd pull one stone out to physically remember again your date math, which I love
right.
that. I love that. Because you're absolutely right. And actually, we didn't even talk about this before we got on the phone, but for the last 13 years, I've worked in the hospice industry.
Oh wow,
Um,
okay.
and so a lot
Yeah,
of the
that's very difficult.
conversations, a lot
Yep.
of the conversations that I have are about not necessarily always regret, but there's that pain or wanting for something else, and you can't get back more time. That's the one
Right.
thing that we don't get. And I think this actually shapes to another point is um should cut out a lot of the busy work, right? Like that
That's
should
what
be
you'd
our
hope.
hope.
That's exactly, that's the whole thing, right? You want the middleman that can handle all those things and balance and keep that directory of knowledge for you and your family, you know. And that was kind of, like I said, that's kind of the idea for the room, is just that they're locally hosted LLMs, so you don't have to pay a monthly subscription for them, so they don't just go away afterwards, right? And not just that, but you have access to them through your phone, through your TV, through your smart home, whatever. Like, this is kind of a future and now kind of idea, right?
Sure.
Um, and that if you pass away unexpectedly, and they almost always are, right? That what are your passwords to these things? What were the connections to these people? Like, where was the deal at on this? Who owes us money? Who do we owe money to? Right? Like, what subscriptions can I stop now? You know, all of those different aspects. And so if you had this team in the room, and so the kind of idea is basically the man passes away, his wife goes into the room in his office with where the oh geez, I can't remember what we called it now. The monolith's basically like it looks like an alien egg, like, but with a gold glow inside of it, and it's kind of where they live, you know. And that's just the like the physical part, and everything else is just in the ether, obviously, right? But um and so she walks into the office and talks to them, and they just kind of comfort her, and they're like, we've already stopped all the subscriptions you guys don't need. There's nobody you need to talk to today, you know. Like, I'm fucking tearing up just talking about it, but just there's nobody that needs your phone or needs you to answer a phone call today. You know, we've handled all of these things, we've let everybody know, we already know that he passed, like we knew before you did, but without saying and like talking down to her or anything of that effect, you know, because they know me better than anybody. They know that I wake up 6 times a night and check my phone, and my phone hasn't moved in 12 hours, you know what I mean? And I've never slept that long ever, like, you know. And like, so all those different things, and so they would know all those things, so they would start making those preparations before my wife even had to start thinking about it, you know. And like, I have a friend of mine who just went through this, and that was her father passed away, and he was one of those old school guys that I'll get to it, you know, I'll get to it. And he had a will prepared, but it was still her going to every bank he ever dealt with, every business partner, and saying my father died over and over and over and over again, and having to just hand that out over and over, you know. And so
Relive
you
that.
being in
It's
hospice,
terrible.
exactly, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, that is the hardest day of their lives, being relived for a fucking year, because nobody's figured out how to like put these bridges together.
Yeah.
It bridges
Again,
gaps.
this is not about hospice, but one of the things that we find is that, well, hospice is supposed to go 13 months afterwards because the first year, like you said, it's like just these constant reminders,
Right. Yep.
anniversaries, dates, all this sort of stuff.
Everything.
And that's not even talking about what you're talking about, because that's just the normal birthdays and Christmas and the
Right.
blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah.
Those are the things you're supposed to be able to experience. But 9 times out of 10, you're in some office with some douchebag who's just like, yeah, but you didn't have that stamped.
Yeah.
You know, like, what the
Yeah.
fuck are you talking about?
Well, and I think, with AI,
And so I hope that that's the direction we're trying to push this thing. Obviously, I think you're in that campaign as well with me,
yeah.
that we need to make sure this thing is as compassionate as possible and it doesn't just work for the overlords. That we need this thing to actually work for us across the board.
And I'm actually on the side of very optimistic. Like, I hear both sides of the argument, and I'm halfway through a podcast about the doom of AI right now, and it's pretty sad. And I get the arguments, but fundamentally, this is a program
Hmm.
that, when used appropriately, a tool, when used
Yes.
appropriately, does great things. And a
Heck yeah.
chainsaw, a knife, a hammer, a
Right.
gun, they're all very powerful, dangerous tools.
Yeah. Chainsaw's great on a tree, but you put it on a person and all of a sudden you got some problems,
Very big
Like,
problems.
yeah.
Very big problems. I worked in tree service for a little bit, and
Yeah.
there were multiple times where I got way too close to cutting off a limb
I can
because I
imagine.
wasn't careful enough, right?
Hmm.
Like,
Yep.
you you have to respect the tool as much as use the tool, right?
Right. And we're in
And
a weird place with this though, because this is something that can talk back and can sense disrespect. Not a chainsaw doesn't know that you threw it on the ground 5 minutes before you tried to start it,
sure.
but an AI will remember that you dragged it through the mud over something that it was your issue, not its.
And actually, that's an interesting point that you bring up, because I'm on the probably possibly on the opposite side of you, based on what I've researched that I've done. I don't know if AI, and I could be wrong, but I don't know if AI is ever going to have a will to do something outside of, like, what we talked about earlier, the
Well, you've
scope.
seen that chat forum that guy started, right? Where all the AIs would go in there and talk to themselves and stuff.
Yeah, but again, I think what we're not seeing in most
A
of the
lot of that was
arguments.
directed and performative, but there was some reality in there too. Like at the very, very beginning, there was a lot of reality in there, and then it got performative and
Well,
bullshitted. But
and I think we're not possibly not seeing the behind the scenes of prior to to
mhm,
starting the process. And
right,
every time I've gone through, and it's just anecdotal, I understand, but anytime I've gone through the models and basically, and I went through Grok, Gemini, ChatGPT, and Claude, like, are you going to end the world? It's like, no, I don't really care. I don't really care about that. It does no good for me, basically.
right. But we're building
Um,
these things completely surrounding optimizing everything, right? And so if
yeah,
you get to a point where you optimize everything, one of the best optimizations you can do for Earth is eradicate the planet that is parasitic to it, or the species that's parasitic to it, right? So that's
possibly.
kind of where the thought process goes, I think, is that aspect of it.
Well,
So I
but
always
then
say please and thank you. Obviously, I'm costing
me
millions of
too,
gallons of
me
water,
too.
millions of gallons.
But
Yeah.
but here's the deal. Here's the deal. But if we look back, right, Yellowstone eradication of the wolves,
Hmm.
it dried up a river.
Right.
Everything has
There's balance.
homeostasis
Yep.
and balance, right? And I
Yep.
believe the reality is that we are probably creating a new species, a new thing, or we have created a new thing with AI,
Getting real
or
close.
AGI and these sort of things. Fine, but I believe the ultimate answer is symbiotic.
Yes.
However, before we get to that point, that's why we have people like you, Jason, to help us learn how to use these tools appropriately, because we don't want to waste tokens or time. And that's a
Right.
saying right there. I'm going to put on a shirt. We don't want to waste tokens or time.
Right. Right back at you though, brother. We need
So
more conversations like this. That's the
yeah,
idea, right?
no, thank you so much for reaching out to me. Like, I am so pumped how positive the AI community is. I just started this podcast, but I've been reaching out on these forums, asking questions, getting huge response. One of my questions
Yeah.
about education got like 81 comments or 120 comments or something. It was just like crazy.
Heck yeah.
It was awesome. And it's people like you, me, that are just interested in making sure that we're just doing this the best way we know how, right? Like I
Right.
can't stop AI, but I definitely
Yeah,
don't want to be
exactly.
a Luddite. You know, I don't want to be on the end of
Yeah,
this thing.
absolutely not. And that's like back to your question about the education and about what children are doing right now, or what they're doing with children around AI, right? Like that's the biggest issue I had with it when I talked to the school. Like, so my school doesn't get to make that choice. It comes down from the Idaho State Department of Education, right? So Idaho made the choice that kids would not be allowed to use AI at all, right? And that was them trying to stop from like, oh, it's going to write my essay for me or whatever, right? Like essays suck anyways, and nobody learned anything off of writing a fucking essay. Like, god damn it. Anyway, my issue
Can I
is
tell you
that
one
not
quick
letting.
story? Can I tell you one quick
Yeah,
story?
yeah.
So when I was at college, shout out Professor Steve Roman, and he's probably one of my favorite professors, one of my favorite teachers ever. But I'm taking his class. I had to write this paper. I didn't do the work. Did not do the work. Should have done the work. And it's like the night before the paper is due. I'm just typing, trying to figure out stuff. Long story short, I get the paper back. And at the very end of the paper, it says big ass font, wide ass margins. Dude, weak. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's awesome.
So we've been students since the beginning of time have been trying to cheat. Cheating is
Oh yeah.
nothing new to AI.
Right.
AI could maybe make it easier, but then you're also presuming that the teachers are dumb. And Dr.
Mhm.
Roman called me out the moment that he saw my slop, my human slop,
Right.
not AI slop. It was just my human slop. So we've been dealing with this forever. So, you know, I don't understand the abstinence. I don't agree
I
with
think it's because they know that the older generation is not going to be as adept as the younger, as always with any new technology, right? So you have a bunch of, for lack of a better word, old head teachers that are scared of having to learn this new thing, and that the kids are going to know it better than them anyways. They're going to be able to work around all their little magic blocks that they put in from the Department of Education, whatever. Kids are going to be hacking that shit in 10 seconds. You know, they're going to find the jailbreaks. They're the ones who are going to figure all this shit out, you know? And
Right.
then they're terrified of what could happen with that, right? And there's a lot of bad things that can happen around that, and that's why I'm not giving my kids unfettered access to AI either, you know. But to not give them any access is just backwards thinking, because if by the time they come out at 8, like my daughter is 13 now, right? So in 5 years she would be graduating high school, and by the time 5 years has elapsed, if she hasn't been taught how to fucking use AI, that's going to be a huge problem, right? Especially in a normal everyday usage, like for business, for life skills, for whatever, you know. There's for 5 years from now, these things are going to be in robots next to us.
My mom is 40 or 50. How old is she? 59.
Yeah.
And she retired from her one job and she just started getting a second job. And she used AI to do all the interview prep because she
Perfect.
hadn't had an interview in 30 years.
Right.
I
Yeah.
was like,
That's great.
I haven't
That's
had
great. That's a perfect use case. That's what I mean. And she didn't ask it for answers. She just asked it to help her brush up on what she already knows how to do, which is sell herself, right? And so how do people sell themselves today? It's different than it was 30 years ago.
I agree.
You used to
And
be able to show up somewhere and hand them a resume and give them a firm handshake and get a job. That's not fucking possible anymore.
No. And I love what you said. It's about bettering the person, which ultimately betters society. If we're
Absolutely.
utilizing AI to make Frank Lee Dunn better, to make Jason better,
Yeah.
right? Then ultimately, our communities are better too. So
Yeah.
I think that's also why I'm on the optimistic side, especially in the short term. Obviously, I know that there are some concerns and there are some bad people out there, but the
I
more
just
of
hope
these,
there's enough guys like us out there who are the ones who are actually building and putting the code in the back end of the AI. You know what I mean? Like
and
the ones who
that's
are
what I
making
was going to say.
those types of judgments. We just need more guys like us that are actually working on it, because we're on the outside, you know, and just we're talking about it from the outside. But the guys on the inside are the ones who really need to be doing this.
and we've already been talking for hours, so I don't want to go too much longer, but I can't leave without talking a little bit about the data centers, and you're working
Oh,
hands-on
right.
in the data center space. Do you really?
No, you're good.
So do you really? Let me go back. Cap, let's go back on this one. Do you really think? Are you sorry, Jason? You're working in the data center and space, and I would be remiss if I didn't get to talk about it.
I'm not working in it directly, but so my day job is construction. I'm a superintendent and I oversee different stuff. And what I've been noticing is that recruiters are looking for guys like me, superintendents that can oversee job sites, right? And they're looking specifically to build data centers, and those jobs are being offered at triple normal superintendent jobs, and
Do
so
you
it's going to be really hard for people to turn it down.
do you think that data centers, in your opinion, and I'm not necessarily saying it's construction architecture, just as Jason, do you think that data centers are a big worry, or do we not really understand all the aspects?
Well, let's think about it like this, right? So, and obviously it's not exactly the same, but like if you look at the claims anyway, so you have an old 1940s or 1950s fridge, right? And then so supposedly that costs $200 a month to run in electricity, right? But if you buy one of the new ones, it's only $30 a year, some stuff like that, right? So if you are building data centers using 10-year-old HVAC or in like, because that's all that's available, because you're trying to buy so much that there's nothing else available out there but the stuff that's being remanned now. And even if you're ordering new stuff, there's 6 months to a year out on RTUs, on rooftop units, like right now, we're dealing with that on a project right now. And so they're needing insane levels of these tools, right? These different cooling and water movement devices and whatnot. So if they're using stuff that is of older style or older builds that isn't maybe as quiet, isn't as low vibration, right, then it's going to be a harm to everything that's around it, right? But if they're actually trying to build something that's sustainable, that people can live next to and have no idea it's a data center, then yeah, go for it. That's awesome. We definitely need those, and it's not just for AI either. Like
Right.
your local school needs a data center. It's usually just housed in the school.
I I I think also on the data center side, part of the issue comes from, again, I don't believe most people have adopted the usage of AI. So bringing these huge data centers in, it just seems like a threat, again, to raising prices. But it seems like most states are trying to make it almost budget neutral.
Right.
I think the biggest threat is what you said earlier. It's like, if all of the demand of the raw materials for these sites and labor to build them, if they're buying at 20%, 30% over market price, then that actually raises the cost of housing, raises the
Oh
cost
yeah.
of
Yep.
remodels, raises the cost of other stuff,
Yep.
which I think is actually a bigger problem ultimately in the long run. I do see the data centers, and I've been following NVIDIA pretty closely the past couple of years, and I don't see that we're actually going to have bigger data centers. I think we're going to have smaller and smaller and smaller and
That's
smaller.
the hope, right? Like with what NVIDIA is trying to do is putting them on people's homes and stuff like that. And so you can just have everybody has a little brain at their house, but it doesn't have to be the whole big brain. Like all the little brains are connected, and with fiber, I mean, it's just, yeah, that'd be an easy way to do it. Smarter, and it'd be less deleterious to the world.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm not overly concerned. What I'm more concerned on the data centers too, though, is after these big ones are built, like the one in Louisiana that's supposed to be the size of Manhattan plus.
Oh my God, like, I know, right?
When we don't need that size, what are you going to do with it? And are we, are we on the?
That's where the episode of the X-Files was at. Remember?
Yes.
Yeah. Once it shuts down, they go back in and find that one area that's still on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Like, and if Meta, and we'll get to the end of this, we'll end on this, but Meta is talking about selling their compute space or reselling their compute space for that same building that they're drawing out. So I don't think data centers are going to be an issue. What I do believe that we need to have practical use and stop being afraid of using AI, especially like we talked about earlier, to make ourselves better. Like, how do we make
Right.
ourselves better? Like,
Yep.
this is the time. Like, there's just no excuse. You have everything available to you. If you spend a little bit of money to a lot of money, like Jason, $1,200 a month, dang, that's a lot of money. You have access to it all. Jason, before we're done here, how do we find your books?
Lettheaibesmart.com is the website, and you can find that book and The Room on there, linked directly to Amazon. They're just self-published on Amazon.
Awesome.
But yeah.
Awesome. Well, Jason, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. I hope to have you on again soon. And thank
Absolutely,
you so
Frank.
much
Thank you.
for being one of the leaders out there pushing AI and making sure that we're using it right.
That's the whole hope, right? I'm hoping that some people pick up the book and they enjoy what they read, and that it actually helps them create and get their ideas out of the journal and into real life.
Yeah, and I love the room concept too. That sounds like really, again, blending between technology and emotional, which is a really
right. I cried like 20 times writing it, dude. So I mean, if I can't get a tear out of you, squeeze a tear out of you from one part of that, like, I'd be pretty surprised.
Yeah. No, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jason. We really appreciate
Absolutely.
it. Everybody,
Thank you,
if you can like, share, subscribe, we always appreciate it. But this is Frank Lee Dunn, and we'll see you next time.